Hello everyone, this is PK Entertainment and we are back again, and here now we have another video for you, and we're going to talk about Spider-Man No Way Home and the box office grosses that it made during its first real opening weekend within US cinemas and also worldwide as well. Now note that there may be spoilers during this review for the movie or other MCU entries, and as well as the previous Spider-Man films, Spider-Man Homecoming and also Spider-Man Far From Home, so just beware when going into this overall video. Now you can check out both my non-spoiler and spoiler reviews of Spider-Man No Way Home within the channel, and I will leave some links within the description as well. Now, according to confirmed reports, in terms of its opening performance in US cinemas, Spider-Man No Way Home made a fantastic 253 million opening weekend total, easily surpassing the previous top opening weekend of 90 million, which ironically was made by Venom Let There Be Carnage. Now, overall, in terms of the rankings, Spider-Man No Way Home remains third in terms of opening weekend, behind first Avengers Endgame, which of course completely destroyed all expectations unfathomably with a 356 million opening weekend, and of course in second place we have Avengers Infinity War, which back in 2018 scored a massive $257 million opening weekend. Now, in terms of the worldwide box office, Spider-Man No Way Home currently stands at 587 million worldwide, so already more than halfway towards that magical $1 billion mark. So of course all of this is fantastic news for both Sony and Marvel, capping off a great achievement for the current Spider-Man trilogy following of course Homecoming and Far From Home. It really cements the popularity of the Tom Holland's Spider-Man, which despite some criticism of the more hardcore comic book fans, which is really more of the interpretation of the character rather than the performance of the character by Tom Holland, the fact remains that this interpretation has massively connected with mainstream audiences. So any Tom Holland Spider-Man film, whether it was released in May, July or December, pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, was always going to be big. Now of course we can never deny the association of the character within the MCU, which is the prime reason for Sony working with Marvel, was a massive factor. Of course the inclusion of Doctor Strange, who as well is another established MCU character, for which again they repeated the same narrative of giving Tom Holland another major MCU character to balance off, following the dynamic that we saw with Tony Stark in Homecoming and also with Nick Fury in Far From Home. We then talk about all of the hints and allusions to the introduction of the multiverse within the MCU, which had already been generated from the finale of Loki, of course, but this was really the first cinematic introduction of the concept, so this alone brought in a lot of interest and curiosity because of the perceived future and direction of the character, whether he would stay within the MCU or would he fully return to the Sonyverse. As we all know, they're currently building around all of Spider-Man's iconic villains, of course with both the Venom films, and of course we will see from Morbius next year, and we know that Kraven the Hunter is in the pipeline as well. So lots of speculation and curiosity surrounding the multiverse ensured more attention towards this film, and of course that speculation was fueled even more so by the prospect of previous Spider-Man villains, which many deemed it was only logical that we would see, of course, the inclusion of previous Spider-Man actors, both in Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire, also make an appearance, which of course, as per the video, spoiler alert, they did make an appearance throughout this film. And the idea of Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire appearing really generated an almost never-ending incessant hype and anticipation since the project was announced. So again, we had this huge wealth of fan service, proven to be very critical to the film's success, and of course we saw that recently proved to be successful as well for Ghostbusters Afterlife. So the real surprise here is not that the film has been big, but just exactly how big it's become, given of course that we are in a post-pandemic climate. I think overall the Christmas release also helped, the fact that there's no real serious competition both before and post its release. Sorry Matrix Resurrections, but there just isn't the same kind of level and hype for that movie as what there was for Spider-Man No Way Home. And of course this Christmas period has benefited so many huge movies in the past, so we look at of course the Lord of the Rings trilogy, Avatar in 2009, and of course Star Wars The Force Awakens in 2015, which at the moment are more apt comparisons in terms of scale and anticipation for a true massive movie event. Now the real debate is, after all of the initial fears of COVID emerged about the state of theatres, the ever-increasing emergence of streaming platforms, many people were scared as we will almost see an extinction of the formats in terms of movie going at the cinematic experience. The real question has been asked by many: has Spider-Man No Way Home in many ways become the saviour of cinemas? Now, it's an important milestone, yes, of course, but we also have to bear in mind that theatres were really making a comeback very much so already in terms of prominence prior to the release of No Way Home. During this year, we had seen a run of successful movies going back from Godzilla vs. Kong, A Quiet Place 2, Fast and Furious 9, Free Guy, Venom Let There Be Carnage, Shang-Chi Legend of the Ten Rings, and also Ghostbusters Afterlife. Now, whilst of course this is not how things were currently before pre-pandemic, and in all likelihood we still will never go back to that phase overall, but we can't deny there was a resurgence in terms of where we were a year ago. And what Spider-Man No Way Home, along with the previous releases as I just mentioned, has ultimately proved is that people are willing to go to theatres if they deem the movie is worthy enough. So what we have to concede now is that a film failing just because of the pandemic is no longer a valid excuse. At the end of the day, if a film generates enough hype and resonance with the audiences and turns out to be also good in quality, then people will turn out to watch. We also have to bear in mind that this film has managed to break numerous records despite the recent emergence of the Omicron variant, yet people still went. This massive gross has been achieved despite the fact that in some countries there is still a limited capacity of which cinemas have been opened. So it only opens more speculation as to how much more this would have made if we were in a pre-pandemic climate. The other excuse runs the other way now, that audiences can no longer give the reason that they won't see a movie because of the pandemic. No longer can they complain about safety protocols or social distancing, when clearly none of that mattered when it became towards Spider-Man No Way Home. Now, of course, just because Spider-Man No Way Home made all of this money, that doesn't mean that every movie now post its release will see a huge upsurge in box office. Now, unfortunately, the success of Spider-Man No Way Home will see a further dependence on franchise IPs and reboots and sequels rather than original films. And this argument comes from both sides in terms of the studios and audiences. We have this eternal debate that we're constantly in this run of reboots and sequels and that we're never seeing anything new or original. But the point is, when we do get something new or original, we don't get the same turnout as what we do for sequels such as Spider-Man No Way Home. So in one way, yes, the studio should be having more confidence to put out more original content, but at the same time, you can't expect them to do that if the audiences aren't going to show the same amount of interest and enthusiasm as with an original film as what they will with a Spider-Man No Way Home. Certainly in the last 5 to 10 years, we've seen many failures in terms of sequels and reboots, but all it takes is one massive success such as Spider-Man No Way Home, and the studios will forget about original content and try to replicate the success of No Way Home. Now, for me, the far bigger concern is that, especially after Spider-Man No Way Home and also Ghostbusters Afterlife, is that we'll even see a more of a doubling down on not only the sequel emergences, but also the nostalgia bait. Now, of course, we've seen this multiple times in the past, where we've seen iconic characters be revived in modern day films with the previous actors coming back to reprise their role. So this is nothing new here, but previously those appearances were far more in a limited capacity. But after the success of No Way Home, where, as I stated in my non-spoiler and spoiler reviews, both Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire had far more prominent roles, are we going to see this injected even more in future films, where instead of focusing on newer characters within these franchise reboots, we're just going to try and wheel out all of the older actors to come back and reprise this role? We've already seen this with the Flash movie that's coming in 2002, with Warner Brothers clearly desperately hoping that the inclusion of Michael Keaton's Batman and Ben Affleck's Batman will share the same nostalgic feelings at what we saw for No Way Home. We of course have Indiana Jones, which whenever it comes out, wheeling again Harrison Ford, his 75 years of age. We have, of course, the upcoming Matrix Resurrections, when, of course, we're bringing back both Keanu Reeves and Carrie-Anne Moss to reprise their roles of both Neo and Trinity. So the overall question and concern is, when will it end? You know, at the end of the day, I've always stated that if we are going to continue these franchises, that it's best for them if we continue to move the franchise forward rather than going back and repeating what's going on before. So, of course, Spider-Man No Way Home, whilst being very good for theatres, in terms of the future, in terms of new original concept, I just fear that we will see a further regression than a further progression in terms of new franchises, because at the end of the day, all of these iconic films had to start off somewhere. But if we keep rebooting and reintroducing older actors that played these iconic characters before, we're never going to find the next Star Wars, the next Matrix in the future down the line. So the only real question that remains is, will Spider-Man No Way Home go on to become the first billion-dollar grossing movie post the pandemic era? It stands to reason now that it will only be obvious as to not if, but when. As I mentioned already, it's already over halfway there with 587 million. So it will probably reach the billion milestone probably within the next week and a half to 2 weeks. As I mentioned before, there's nothing really more in terms of competition. From all of the huge positive reception, this is a movie that you can really enjoy in multiple viewings as well. So there's no doubt that it will generate enough repeat viewings despite a pandemic climate to go on and cross over $1 billion gross at the box office. So how far can it go? Well, I don't think it will achieve the $2 billion grosses achieved by Endgame, Avengers Infinity War and Force Awakens, I just don't see it can do enough repeat business, especially in a pandemic era. But I certainly think it has a good chance of reaching $1.5 billion, of course, with what's achieved by both Avengers films back in 2012 and 2015 as well. I think it's got a real good shot at achieving that major milestone. So overall, just to surmise then, I think Spider-Man No Way Home has been a great, huge achievement. Again, I think its biggest achievement is that it shows that people are willing to go to theatres if they deem the film is worthy enough. Again, it kind of eliminates that whole excuse about the pandemic and people being scared to venture outside and watch cinema. So hopefully it will really help other films that we see out coming in a recent future also receive a huge upsurge in box office. Of course, it will even exude a huge confidence for Sony in furthering their own Spider-Man universe with their villains, but there are questions about that, and I will venture that in a separate video. And it also reaffirms some confidence within the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Now, when we go over Phase 4, particularly the Cinematic Universe, there's no doubt about it that really 2021 has seen very much a mixed results in terms of box office performance and also audience reception when we look at the 3 previous films, Black Widow, Shang-Chi and the Legends of the Ten Rings, and also Eternals. And many critics and detractors were starting to state that perhaps the MCU was beginning to see its eventual fall, and perhaps we were coming to the overall end of the huge enterprise that had been generated way back in 2008 with the first Iron Man film. So this will really push back those fears and doubts to some degree, but of course we will only see if that really sticks by the future releases coming up next year. Of course, we have Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness coming out in May 2022. We have Thor: Love and Thunder becoming as well, I believe, in July 2022, and of course later on we have both the Guardians and the Galaxy, the 3rd film, and of course Ant-Man and the Wasp 3 Quantum Mania as well. So really it will be those films that prove as to whether the Marvel brand is back to where it was back in 2018 and 2019, and we will wait and see how well these films perform. And no doubt about it that Spider-Man No Way Home has generated a huge spark and invigoration in terms of momentum for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but hopefully and most importantly it can also generate the same amount of momentum and forward thinking in terms of theatre going experience and propelling even more people to go back and watch all of these big event films at the cinemas as well. So those are my overall thoughts and feelings on the major box office performance of Spider-Man No Way Home. Let me know what you think in the comments below. How much bigger do you think it can become? Can it reach $1 billion within its 2nd weekend worldwide? And if so, do you think it can eventually go to 1.5 or even, dare we say, 2 billion as well? Let me know what you think in the comments. Please also hit and like those subscription and notification buttons so I can provide you with more high quality content like this in the future. But that's it for now. Take care of yourselves, stay at safe distances, and I will see you very, very soon.